Pyra and Mythra are great characters in a game where the storytelling is quite terrible for all intents and purposes. This turns them into phenomenal characters, as they are the shining stars across the dull grey ocean of clouds. Let's start with Pyra. She's a sweet and kind companion who, despite being overshadowed later, her importance to the first act, the motivations of the player, and her dual character persona can't be understated. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a long game, like ludicrously long, like 7 hours too long. In a story this long, you are going to need some severe player motivation to finish the game. For some, it might be the combat, although to me it didn't evolve nearly enough throughout the game to remain a driving force. For others, it might be seeing the next Titan. While admittedly this is cool, it's not 60 hours of my time cool. So for most, the primary motivation will be the story. As I said, Xenoblade 2 doesn't have the best in the franchise. Shulk's drive for vengeance and Noah's quest to reach the city were far more exciting narratives to watch unfold, but neither of these games had as strong a motivation for completion as Xenoblade 2. The goal of Xenoblade 2 is to help Pyra reach her home at the top of the World Tree. This motivation is more effective than the rest of the franchise because it ties the story progression to a character, Pyra. This is a risky strategy, because if the character you choose is a poor one, everyone is going to drop out of the game. After all, no one is going to be invested in helping the character achieve their goals. That's why the likability of Pyra is so critical to Xenoblade 2's success. The way they achieve this is by making her a caring companion with no real downside. This makes 90% of the players want to help her, and will push them through the first 3 chapters to get where the plot kicks off with Mythra. Now, it shouldn't come as a shock to anyone that if Mythra woke up first, many players would bounce off the game, as she's not exactly an endearing protagonist. I think this is why her 2 fan service scenes are front-loaded to right after she joins the party, as a way to encourage players to be more affectionate towards her early on. It's essential for the players to like Mythra as fast as possible, because she's the main character now. Like I said before, 90% of players will like Pyra and want to help her because she has no fundamental flaws. And that's her problem, she's a boring character. She has no rough edges or character arc to go through, which is why Mythra is necessary from a storytelling perspective. They needed to give this character an arc, and instead of expanding on Pyra, they chose to introduce an entirely new personality in Mythra. So this is where the essay parts ways with Pyra, because there's quite simply nothing left to say about her. While Mythra is inserted quite jarringly into the plot, her character development begins almost immediately. Throughout Moradin, she goes from completely uncooperative and combative to slightly more willing to open up. You never find out the reason behind her initial abrasive side until the DLC. While I do have mixed feelings about hiding crucial character information in a totally different game that was released a year after the original, I can't deny that it elevated Mythra from my favourite Xenoblade Chronicles 2 character to my second favourite character in the franchise behind Dunban. While Mythra starts off as a typical tsundere, her motivation for becoming moody is quite different from other characters of the same trope. Generally, tsunderes are walled off due to their high status and practice of decorum. This seemed to be the case as Mythra is the most important person in the world of Xenoblade 2, but it was also reflected in her princess-like design, which we'll come back to later. Mythra walls herself off because the last group of people she opened up to got hurt or even killed as a result of her actions. She walls herself off from her next driver because she knows that what they have to do to get to Elysium will hurt him. So she quite literally locks herself away inside Pyra, and when she's forced to resurface again to face off against Malos, she remains aloof, still wishing to be concealed by her persona. Speaking of Mythra's character design, it leaves a lot to be desired, while at the same time leaving nothing to the imagination. I'm not going to get into a sexualization and media rant, but just know I don't generally have a problem with it from a political viewpoint. I'm more annoyed by it when it doesn't make sense or doesn't fit with the theme of the character, like how it doesn't fit with Mythra. She's supposed to be withdrawn and hiding herself away, but her clothes scream, "Look at me, I have huge boobs." It also doesn't make sense that this regal figure within the world, one of God's 2 children, is dressed like she's trying to get back at her dad. It just doesn't fit with the character at any point in the story, except maybe at the start of the Golden Country DLC. The final point I want to talk about is Mythra's voice acting. I've said this before about the Xenoblade series in particular, but a 100-hour JRPG is not the place for first-time voice actors to be cutting their teeth. It's not terrible by any means, but Mythra and the entire cast for the most part aren't ready for such a massive project, and it's hurtful that they were cast because they were cheaper to hire. Mythra is one of the best characters in the Xenoblade franchise, but I can't deny that she has some serious downsides to both her personas.